If you love crispy, crunchy pickles, even after they've sat on the shelf in your pantry for a year, then you are absolutely going to want to watch this video. I'm Carolyn from Homesteading Family, and I tried 5 different pickling methods and found the absolute best method for home canning pickles. I'm going to show it to you today. If you've ever tried canning pickles, then you're probably already familiar with most of the common tips. Things like working really fresh with really fresh cucumbers, keeping everything nice and cold, maybe adding some tannins like some horseradish leaf or grape leaf, and cutting off the blossom end of your cucumbers before you pickle them. All of these tips are really good, and they're actually really important, useful tips, but they won't make really crispy, crunchy pickles all by themselves. Last year I set out to find the best method for making crispy, crunchy, canned pickles that can sit on my shelf. So I tried 5 different methods. Let's go check them out. So it's important to know that every single one of these methods are approved methods. So these are all safe pickles, even though there's 5 different methods. First of all, I tried my old standard kosher dill, and these have a wonderful flavor. Now these are just a quick pickle. They haven't been brined or anything like that. I just love their flavor. They're nice and dilly. After a year, you can see they are not very crisp. There's a little crunch to them, but not very much. And then I tried a long fermented pickle. Now this has just been fermented and then canned. So this does not have any vinegar in it. And let me tell you, well, they're a little bit crisper, but they don't even smell good. I don't even want to put this in my mouth. It does not smell like vinegar. It doesn't smell sour. Even with the dill in it, the dill just kind of got a strange smell to it. And they kind of went a little bit gray from the fermenting. I'm not crazy about this. I love fresh fermented pickles, but not after they've been canned. Then I tried fermenting these pickles and then soaking them in fresh water for 2 days, changing it out, and then pickling them, canning them in a regular vinegar pickle brine. Now, not very crispy, but the flavor is a little bit better. I don't know. It's not great. I'm not crazy about them, and they're definitely not crispy enough to keep using these. Then I tried a long brine. Now, I've got to say, I think these are very, very nice, crisp pickles. Look at that. They actually crisp up pretty well. And their flavor is pretty good. I don't think it's awesome, but it's actually pretty tasty, and there's a bit of crispness. After a year of sitting on the pantry shelf, those are actually pretty good. Then I tried a brand new method of canning pickles. And after a year, look at that. You could actually hear that thing crunch. I am so impressed with this. I mean, can you hear the crunchiness of that? And the flavor is great. It's sour. It is spicy. This is my new official favorite pickle. Making pickles at home is such a fun thing to do, and it's so great to have great pickles just sitting on your shelf for when you need them. But you do need to follow some techniques in order to make sure that you end up with great quality pickles. Now, as soon as you bring these pickles in from the garden or from the farmer's market, you're gonna wanna get them into a saltwater brine and get their blossom ends cut off. Now, it's okay if you're not ready to make pickles because they can sit in your brine cold, like in the refrigerator, for up to about 7 days, and you can even keep adding to it if you want. So right now, I'm gonna cut off the blossom ends. So you have the stem end, the part where the plant, the cucumber was attached to the plant, and you have the blossom end. You wanna remove a little bit of this blossom end to remove the enzyme that was in the blossom. You do that by just slicing off a small slice of the blossom end. Now, That's all we need to do for these right now. And we're just gonna set them into a bowl until we're ready to take the next step. Now, make sure if you find any that have some not great spots or soft, mushy parts, that you set those aside to use for fresh eating or for relish or something chopped. You only want really good, strong, healthy, firm cucumbers for this to make the best pickles. Now, we're looking for about 8 pounds of these pickling cucumbers. And that's important too. Make sure that you only use an actual pickling variety of cucumber. You don't want to use your regular fresh eating varieties. They just won't give you the best ones. And try to use the smaller ones. You don't want them to be too big. I am going to finish this up in just a moment. And we're gonna make our brine. Now here I have 1 quart of warm water. And I have 3/4 cups of salt. Just a good quality salt is fine. Today I'm using a Redmond real salt. And mix this up all the way until it's all the way dissolved. Now, we would never want to put our cucumbers into warm water. So we're just going to use this little bit of warm water to dissolve the salt. And then we're going to add in really, really cold water up to the 2-gallon line. Now, once we have that made, we're going to want to put our cucumbers into a large container, something that will hold all 8 pounds of cucumbers and 2 gallons of this brine. Pour the brine over the cucumbers and then put it all in the refrigerator for at least 12 hours. Now you can get away with up to 7 days, like I was saying, and you can keep adding to it if you don't have the 8 pounds yet. But you want them to be in the refrigerator, and you want to make sure to weigh down your cucumbers so that they're always underneath the brine level. Now I'm going to get a little bit more cold water here. Here's a 5-gallon bucket that I brined yesterday. It's been sitting in the refrigerator overnight with a plate keeping it down, and these guys are all ready to go on to the next step. Now we're going to make our pickling brine. We're going to take 8 cups of water. Make sure it's a really good filtered water or distilled water. 6 cups of a 5% vinegar. Now you can choose what kind of vinegar you want. Just make sure it's a 5% and that it's been pasteurized. You don't want a raw apple cider vinegar here because that will continue to change percentage of acidity while it's in storage. Today I'm using a distilled white vinegar. Take a 1/4 cup of sugar, 1/2 cup of salt, and any sort of really good quality salt will be fine. A sea salt or something with no additional additives is great for this process. And then we're going to want to take 1 tablespoon of pickling spices. You can either make your own or you can buy pre-made pickling spices, and they're just good dry spices. And you want to tie that up into a small piece of cheesecloth or butter muslin or a piece of a clean old white cotton t-shirt. Tie it into a little ball so those spices aren't going to come out on you. And then we're going to bring the entire thing up to a simmer, stirring every so often to make sure that we're dissolving the salt and the sugar. Now that our brine is going, we're going to have to work really quickly. And if it comes to a boil long before we're ready to use it, we'll have to turn it off and wait. We don't want it to steam away. I have 8-pint jars all ready to go. They're freshly washed and they're nice and warm. The lids and the bands have also been freshly washed. And I'm starting my canner right now. I'm going to bring it up to about 140 degrees while I'm waiting. Today I'm using the electric canner, and you're going to see why in a moment. This makes this so much easier, but I only want to get it warm right now, so I'm just preheating it. Now make sure that you have a rack in the bottom of whatever canner you're using. You can certainly use just your regular old canning pot or any stock pot as long as it has a rack on the bottom. But using the electric canner is gonna make life a lot more simple for you. Okay, so now we're gonna start filling our jars. We're gonna drop 1 clove of garlic in the bottom of each of our 8 jars. And then we're gonna add 1 teaspoon of mustard seed to each of these jars and 1 teaspoon of dill. This is good quality dill seed, and oh, it smells so good. Now, if you had fresh dill, you could put a few sprigs in each of these jars, and that would be great, but I don't have fresh dill in the garden yet. Now we want to get our cucumbers sliced and into our jar. So we want to make sure that we don't exceed our head space. So we want to check and see how deep we can get these in here. Today, I want spears, but you can slice these if you want. You could even leave them whole if they're smaller. So I'm just gonna quarter them the long way and start setting them into my jar. I wanna pack as many in as I possibly can. Okay, now our brine has come to a full boil, and as soon as it did, I just went ahead and turned it off, and we're have all of our jars just ready, and our pot is sitting right at 140 degrees. So we actually timed that just right. I am going to go ahead and fill up each of these jars with this hot brine right up to a 1/2 inch of the top of the jar. Now, the method that we're going to be using to can today is called the low temperature pasteurization method. And what that means is that when we get these jars lidded and into the canner, we're not actually going to be bringing them to a full boil like you do with normal canning. Now, this is an approved method that is only safe for certain recipes of pickles. And because your jars never come to that full boil, your cucumbers do not cook nearly as much as they do in traditional canned pickles. This is great for keeping them crispy, but you do have to know a few things about how to use this method properly. One of them is that you have to have a good working thermometer. A candy thermometer is fine. I love my cheese making and dairy thermometer here with this nice long stem. It works really well, but you'll want to make sure that it's properly reading temperature and that it's calibrated. Make sure you run a plastic or a wooden item down the side just to make sure that you don't have any bubbles hiding in there between your pickles. Wipe your rim really well and put your flats on. And tighten down just finger tight with your rings. Always working quickly so that everything stays nice and hot. Now that canner is right up to 140 degrees, which is just how I want it. I only have it a few inches filled with water. And of course that rack is right on the bottom. So I'm just gonna settle these jars right on in, and then I'll adjust the level. So I have all of the jars in here, but they need to be covered with 1 to 2 inches of hot water. So I'm gonna go ahead and add hot water right onto the top here, just to get to 1 to 2 inches. There we go. Now, because we're using this low temperature pasteurization, we are dependent completely on our thermometer, which means that you don't need to make any adjustments for elevation. You also don't need to put your lid on, but you do need to get that good thermometer right in place and bring your pot up to 180 degrees. Now, the real trick of this process is that we have to hold this pot at between 180 and 185 degrees Fahrenheit for a full 30 minutes. If you're on a stovetop, that can be a little bit tricky. So you can see why I like the electric canner for this particular thing. Right now I've cooled off to about 130 degrees. So I'm gonna go ahead and pick it right on up to 180, and then we're gonna hold there for 30 minutes. Now these have been in the canner at 180 degrees Fahrenheit for a full 30 minutes. So we're ready to go ahead and pull them out now and set them down on a towel to cool all the way for 12 to 16 hours. And then check to make sure that they're well sealed before labeling them and putting away. Make sure they sit for at least 2 weeks to fully pickle before you start eating them. Hey, if you like pickles, check out this video here on making an amazing ginger carrot ferment. So good, so amazing. And you guys, enjoy the best, crispest pickles ever.